Welcome you today to our LCC Public Forum Kickoff webinar. This is an event that we conduct each year in order to introduce you to the Great Basin Landscape Conservation Cooperative, provide you an overview of who we are and what we do, as well as to give you an opportunity to provide your thoughts, your complaints, your input on our directions and activities in a very public way. The Great Basin LCC is a public-private partnership, and we value your participation and want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Let's take a look at our agenda. We plan to spend not quite an hour together here today, providing you with a bit of an overview of our activities. But before we jump into that, I wanted to introduce myself as coordinator, the leader of the staff for the Great Basin LCC. And I'm joined here in the room today with Dr. Todd Hopkins, who is our science coordinator. On the phone is Dr. Matt Germino, a research ecologist with the USGS. He's in Boise, Idaho. Not with us yet here is Mr. Max Taylor, who is our GIS specialist and data manager. We also have on the phone a number of our steering committee members who will be joining you shortly, helping to provide an overview of our activities and some recent accomplishments of the Great Basin LCC. As you see, looking at this agenda, we plan to spend just a few minutes giving you some background information to help you as you put your thoughts together for the Great Basin LCC. We'll hear from Liz Mack from Enviro Issues, who are an organization that's helping us with the conduct of this meeting, how to operate the website that we have created to take your input, and then wrap up with a few comments on where do we go from here. So let's begin. Liz, if you'll, there we go. The Great Basin LCC is one of 22 such organizations created across the country to help bring together public and private partners to deal with large landscape issues. And by large landscape issues, I'm referring to those big problems that cross county, state, and regional boundaries, in fact. Things like climate change and the spread of invasive weed species, or the increase in the intensity and frequency of wildfires and the like. These are oftentimes the challenges that are too large for any one organization to deal with alone. And so by working together across organizational boundaries, across political boundaries, we are able to come to grips with these issues and provide managers in the partner organizations with the science and traditional knowledge that they need in order to deal with these issues at more local scales. The LCC network is a robust network. We work together on some of these issues and communicate regularly with a small national program staff back in Washington, D.C. Let's move on. As I mentioned, the LCC is a partnership. We work together with no single organization outweighing another. We value the participation and the input from all of the stakeholders. We are managed by a steering committee of roughly 25 representatives from our partner organizations, and we'll be speaking to those a little bit later on. But what we do is to promote management based upon science and traditional knowledge to enable human and natural communities to respond and adapt to these ongoing changes. Here you see our mission statement. Okay. The geography of the Great Basin LCC is what you see here. We spread across portions of 5 states, from California and Oregon to the west, to Utah, Idaho, and Nevada to the east. you see we have a wide variety of landforms within the Great Basin, and we have a wide variety of issues facing us in the basin. And we'll be talking to those in just a minute. But before we go much further, I'd like to invite a few members of our Great Basin LCC Steering Committee to talk about some of our most recent accomplishments in dealing with these large conservation issues. First, we'll be hearing from Mr. Ted Cook, Field Supervisor of the Fish and Wildlife Office here in Reno. Ted?
Thanks, Rick. So I've been involved with the Great Basin LCC, well, I guess since I've been here now for over 4 years, and more formally on the steering committee recently. And to me, the value that the Great Basin LCC adds to the conversation is what you just said, Rick, about working across boundaries, administrative boundaries, agency boundaries, to try to provide leadership particularly on scientific issues and management issues across the Great Basin. And this has been particularly important to us with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I guess I should pause and mention I'm the field supervisor for the Reno Fish and Wildlife Office of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I'm based here in Reno, and one of the major issues we work on is greater sage grouse. And of course, my agency recently made a decision to not list the greater sage grouse under the Endangered Species Act. And it's because of a clarity of thinking and of commitments on support for science and management implementation for conserving sagebrush ecosystems. Now, the greatest threat to the Great Basin, particularly the southern Great Basin sagebrush ecosystems, is invasive species and fire. And I say invasive species and fire, and not fire and invasive species very purposefully, because really it's cheatgrass that infiltrates the understory of sagebrush dams, which allows fire to play an unnatural role, which results in type conversion from healthy sagebrush ecosystem oftentimes to cheatgrass monocultures. And it's the kinds of products that the Great Basin LCC has helped to lead, or at least helped develop, that has been pivotal to our better understanding of these issues and to designing management actions to address them. So particularly the participation and support for developing the resistance and resilience concepts for managing invasive annual grasses and sagebrush ecosystems. There's also a fire and invasives assessment tool developed by the BLM and other agencies to help implement some of those resistance and resilience concepts. The Great Basin LCC is also leading on helping coordinate testing biological control agents in the Great Basin, evaluating the relationship of grazing by livestock and horses on invasive species and fire, and several other examples. And the Great Basin LCC, the main thing that it brings to the table is the ability to engage all those agencies, state, federal, and others, and then non-governmental entities in a neutral tone and in a collaborative atmosphere to help us think objectively and powerfully about these issues. And so I appreciate the Great Basin LCC being around specifically to help us with our management challenges, particularly related to greater sage grouse.
Okay. Thank you, Ted. Before we move on to our next speaker, I need to pause for just a second and point something out related to this webinar. You see in the top right-hand corner of your screen a set of control buttons. There's an orange button with a left-pointing arrow that allows you, if you were to click on it, open up and see you see the dial-in code, as well as towards the bottom a chance to type in your questions and comments. So I invite you to submit any questions that you might have for me, for Ted, or any subsequent speakers, and we'll have a chance to address as many as we can towards the end of our presentation here today. To make your comments, you need only click in the box that is nearest the bottom of that small menu type in your comments, then click the send button. Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments, Ted, and I look forward to working closely with you as we move forward to implement those land use plans that different agencies have created. At this point, I'd like to switch over to Dr. Matt Germino, who's up in Boise. He'll give us an overview of a newly published document. Matt?
Sure. So thanks, Rick. A little overview of what we do on the science arm of the GBLCC. So we're focusing on synthesis and integration at the interface of science and management at the landscape, eco-regional, and even larger regional scales. And our work in support of the LCC tends to be very well networked, working with large groups of people whose common goal is to develop the science that's needed for managing for resistance and resilience. And my bias is to be working in the upland landscapes. And so many of you may have heard about this large book project, which I'll describe. And I wanted to emphasize it here and present it to you because I think it embraces so much of what the LCC is all about. This is a book, you can see the title, Exotic Brome Grasses in Arid and Semi-Arid Ecosystems of the Western U.S., Causes, Consequences, and Management Implications. So brome grasses are it refers to the 140 to up to 150 species in the Bromus genus, the most notorious of which is cheatgrass, but this also includes red brome, cheatgrass's cousin to the south, Japanese and field brome, congeners of cheatgrass that occur at higher elevations and to the east, and ripgut and other bromes that have long been entrenched in California grasslands. So our motivation for this book was to compare and contrast the ecology and management of these species to try to make some advances upon this problem, which I want to note, these annual grasses have been an issue for something like 100 years, and yet with Secretarial Order 3336, cheatgrass and other annual grasses are right at the core of that Secretarial Order on rangeland fire protection. And so here we are, after 100 years, we're still perceiving this to be a very serious, perhaps the highest priority problem on our Great Basin landscapes. So about 5 years ago, I applied for and received a grant from the USDA to form what's known as the Bromus Research, Extension, and Education Network. Working with Gene Chambers and another colleague, Cindy Brown, we convened about 35 researchers and managers from around the entire Great Basin, actually from around the western U.S., but centered in the Great Basin, and we began to talk about the issues, prioritize research needs and syntheses. Over the next few years, we wrote proposals to try to get those research needs met. Interestingly, none of those proposals were funded. But one of our other, probably our keystone product was this book. So this is a 15-chapter book. Next page, please. Next slide. Thanks. And we have something like about, I think, close to like 40 authors on this. And before I describe the contents of the book, I want to acknowledge this photo, which has become very meaningful to me and emblematic of the book. This is a photo taken by Nolan Preece. And the reason why I like it is that it shows this road going through a once perennial but now annual cheatgrass grassland landscape. Road showing how, if you venture into this landscape, you'll see some of there's a lot to be discovered within it. And what we've learned in our synthesis is that we've passed some low-hanging fruit in terms of what can be learned about the causes and potential controls of cheatgrass, and more importantly, how we can live with cheatgrass in a changing landscape. So we have a very futuristic look in some of our chapters considering climate change and assessing impacts. So the chapters deal with understanding the controls on bromus species, what are the impacts of bromus on the landscape, and how well do we know those impacts? That's really important for justifying the tremendous investment that's made into controlling them. What are the traits of invasive versus non-invasive bromus species, and what do they tell us about invasions? That's very interesting. We created a database, a very large database that summarizes the distribution and traits of all the bromus species. And then most importantly, I think the last few chapters of the book deal with the socioeconomic motivations and drivers of bromus. They're important because any solution to bromus is pretty much going to be driven by people. Next slide, please. And I also wanted to mention that there's, in addition to this book, we have many other wide-ranging eco-regional or even regional projects. We're focusing a lot on post-fire vegetation recovery and land treatment success. I've gone after this topic because I've recognized that it's probably the biggest investment, conservation investment in the Great Basin, and there's a lot of opportunity to increase the effectiveness of seeding and soil treatments following our very large wildfires. So in the last year, we've formed some really tight, significant relationships with BLM across the Great Basin and actually all the way to the national Washington office. We started Sage Success, which is a project looking at factors affecting sagebrush seeding success across the whole basin, and more recently for the 2015 soda fire, which is, I think it's going to be historically significant. This is the first real test case of the Secretarial Order 3336. And next slide, please. That's shown in this slide. And here you can see us interacting with a wide range of stakeholders, BLM field office to national DOI level administrators and landowners, nonprofits here on the soda fire to help talk about what does it mean to do adaptive management, and how are we going to change the way that we're managing these landscapes in order to create a resistant, resilient, and sustainable sagebrush steppe Great Basin ecosystem. Thanks.
Great overview, Matt. Thank you very much. We're all looking forward to the publication of the bromus textbook and all of the lessons that we'll be able to take away from it. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Todd Hopkins, our science coordinator, who will provide us with an overview of a new initiative within the Department of the Interior. Todd?
Thanks, Rick. Hello, everybody. On January 5th, the U.S. Department of Interior Secretary Sally Jewell signed an order number 3336 that Matt alluded to. It's called Rangeland Fire Prevention, Management, and Restoration. And the order sets in motion actions to enhance the protection, conservation, and restoration of a healthy sagebrush ecosystem, and to address important public safety, economic, cultural, and social concerns. This effort builds upon the experience and successes of addressing rangeland fire and the broader wildland fire prevention, suppression, and restoration efforts to date. So the Great Basin faces intensified drought and climate change, coupled with invading non-native annual grasses such as cheatgrass. These elements create conditions that lead to larger, more intense rangeland fires, devastating sagebrush ecosystems and wildlife. Recognizing the need to address this issue on a large scale, Secretarial Order 3336 plays a crucial role in establishing policies and strategies to prevent and suppress rangeland fire and to restore landscapes impacted by fire. Federal agencies manage almost 75% of the land in the Great Basin and need a coordinated strategy for managing the threat of fire. That strategy includes a coordinated science action plan, which assigns the Great Basin LCC as lead or co-lead on 7 different priority action items. And these items include development and identification of an online science delivery system with the Great Basin Fire Exchange, developing an actionable science plan, conducting large-scale research and demonstration projects for control of cheatgrass and other invasive annual grasses, developing and maintaining an inventory of research commitments and capacity, reviewing existing research prioritization and strategies to identify science needs, identifying available funding sources to support the action plan and implement new research in 2017 and beyond. And lastly, we've been tagged with conducting periodic reviews and updates of the science plan. And we'll be working with a lot of other partners, tribes, private agencies, nonprofits in doing this.
Okay. Thanks, Todd. Something that didn't perhaps become clear in Todd's description there is the fact that the Great Basin LCC is called out as a science provider to the large interagency effort. We are the only LCC so named, and so I see a growing role for the Great Basin LCC in providing the science information needed for large-scale management. Great job. Well, as you heard, we have a variety of things underway currently and things that are in our near future that will keep us busy quite a bit. So I'd like to hear from you all, and to help us understand the role of the public forum in getting your input, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bob Nash from the Nature Conservancy in Idaho, who is our chair of our steering committee. Bob?
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I'm currently the chair of the steering committee, soon to step down and be replaced by far more capable individuals. But I will say one of my goals associated with my involvement with the LCC is to help the LCC develop a really robust long-term plan. So part of this initiative is the public forum. And the public forum, it's a short-term interactive website which we've created to do a couple of things. One is to reach out to the larger conservation community to let people know what the LCC has been up to for the past year, but also, and I think far more importantly, reach out to the community to ask those who have not been part of the steering committee what they see as the conservation and scientific priorities for the Great Basin, and how they think the LCC can integrate those priorities into the LCC's work. The key word in landscape conservation cooperative is cooperative, and we don't see the LCC as something of an entity unto itself, but rather would hope it becomes the glue that sticks together all the important work that's going on within the Great Basin. So this forum is an opportunity for us to reach out and provide members 2 weeks to participate, provide us your observations, your thoughts, your impressions, and what our priorities should be. Can I have the next slide? So again, the forum allows us to better understand people's perspectives on landscape scale conservation challenges that we face, how we can better facilitate collaboration within the larger Great Basin, and also somewhat closer to home, the LCC's steering committee has vacancies which we're trying to fill, and we were hoping that individuals might be willing to nominate themselves or nominate a colleague to sit on the steering committee. I will say for myself, like Ted Cook, I've been involved in the LCC for several years. I've been participating since the first kickoff meeting in Boise so many years ago. One of the initiatives of the LCC is trying to develop ways of integrating traditional knowledge with Western or contemporary scientific research to help the management community better understand and better integratively manage our landscapes. And also the LCC periodically provides webinars, which is sharing the work of colleagues and individual researchers who have done work which has been funded by the LCC, and we're interested in recommendations of other possible webinars. So in general, what we'd like is people to go on and tell us what you think and help us truly become that glue that tries to hold together all the good work that's going on in the Great Basin. Back to you, Rick.
Thanks, Bob. As Bob mentioned, the Great Basin LCC is guided by a steering committee. This committee exemplifies the type of collaboration and partnership that is needed to deal with the most pressing conservation issues. We are seeking 4 new members to represent non-governmental organizations and the private community. If you know of or are part of an organization whose work aligns with the mission of the Great Basin LCC, please suggest them to us on the forum site. The information that you provide to us will be, let's move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. The information or the feedback that you provide to us will help us to focus our strategic plan, which has been developed in a draft stage thus far. We want to make sure that we have not missed any major elements of high priority to you and your own stakeholders. We hope that we can get your nominations to the steering committee, and then suggestions, not just for webinars, but what other types of information exchange that you would like to see more of, be they printed materials, things like fact sheets, reports, and the like, digital materials such as webinars, websites, YouTube videos, or other means of sharing information widely, or workshops in which we will bring in some subject matter experts to present information, take questions, and be much more interactive than paper or websites can be. So we are looking for your feedback, and we'll take this feedback, compile it, and make it available to you in a summary report.
So, Rick, could I just jump in for 1 second and just really request people to take a look at the information we're providing associated with this strategic plan. Give it some thought and provide us your feedback. The strategic planning group of the LCC has been working on this plan for the past few months. I'm very excited about where the plan would be taking the LCC, but that's just one person's perspective. And although I'd love to be validated in that perspective, if people feel as though we are moving in a direction which differs from their priorities, we would love to hear from them as well. So please jump on the forum, give us your thoughts. Thank you.
Great, Bob. You're exactly right. We've been working, but we've been very close to the issues. We are looking for a more diverse set of comments and input on this strategic plan. Thanks. Now I'm going to ask Ms. Liz Mack from Enviro Issues to talk us through how to use the public forum.
Thanks, Rick. So here on your screen, you will see the link to the Great Basin Public Forum, greatbasinlcc.publicmeeting.info. This link will also be sent out in a follow-up email immediately after the webinar, so if you don't get a chance to write it down, you will have this in your inbox. The public forum is now live as of this morning, so you can visit that. It's an active link. You can check it out, and in just a moment here, I'll walk you through what the site actually looks like so you can see how to use it, see some of the functionality. It's going to be live 24/7 until late in the evening on Monday, February 8th. So we encourage you to visit multiple times, see how the conversation is developing, see the input people have been adding, and add to the conversation as well. And I also ask that you guys, take this link, share it with colleagues, share it with those that you think may have some good insight, but perhaps have not been as involved with the LCC in the past. So I want to take just a moment here to show you what the actual site itself looks like. So you should see it now here up on your screen. When you get to the website, you'll have a welcome page that kind of walks you through some of the key things we're looking for feedback on in the site. And then across the top, you have your navigation. And this is really designed to just take you kind of through a series of different pages and flow through from one page to the next. So after the welcome, you'll see some information about our strategic plan and the vision that has been set. You'll see the Great Basin LCC's vision statement here from the draft strategic plan, and you will also see a link that takes you to the full plan if you'd like to read it in its current state. The next few pages focus on different goals of the strategic plan. The first one here being landscape focus. So at the top of the page, you'll see some information about this goal. There is a video from Rick Kearney talking a bit about the LCC and its landscape focus. You can read the goal here on the right side of the page, and the goals will always be in these tan boxes for you to view. And we also highlight a recent accomplishment on each page, something that the LCC has done that aligns with that goal. So you have an example of what we're referring to. Here you'll also see some information about a recent funding opportunity. And then throughout the website, you'll see these "Tell us what you think" headers, and this is where we're really looking for your input and your feedback. You'll notice there's two different questions here, one on each side of the page, and there's currently no comments that have been added since we just went live, but folks, once you add a comment, it will display here, and we will have a building conversation. We ask for your name if you're comfortable giving that, but if not, you may also write anonymous if you would like to submit a comment without your name. But you simply just type your comment here into the comment box and then click submit. And on several of the pages, you'll see there's two side-by-side responding to the two questions up above. So as you go through the rest of the form, you'll see a similar outline, but for the different goals. So in collaboration, we're asking you some questions about creating a common vision across the LCC and partners that we should collaborate with and people who should be involved. Under the leadership tab, you will see some information about the steering committee, and as was mentioned earlier, looking to fill a few vacancies. So you'll see some existing steering committee members from the non-government organization and private community, and we are looking for suggestions for additional ones. So you can make your suggestions here in the comment box below. I will draw your attention to the traditional knowledge page. This one is set up just a little bit differently, where this is more of a survey than an open comment box. And these results will not be displayed on the page. It was something we will collect internally, and we will be sharing these in a summary report. So you can complete your answers here and submit it, and it will come to us. Lastly is the information sharing. Again, it's an open comment box. We'd like to hear your ideas about the 2016 webinar series, who would be good speakers for that, what topics you're interested in hearing about, and then also just how you prefer to receive information going forward. And on the final page, you'll see some next steps, some information about the upcoming sagebrush ecosystem conservation meeting. And then there's a final kind of open response for any additional feedback you have, whether it be on the draft strategic plan, recommendations for future projects of the LCC. And this comment box will not be displayed. This will just go directly to the staff at the Great Basin LCC. So that, in a nutshell, is the forum. As we mentioned, it is live now at greatbasinlcc.publicmeeting.info. .info, and again, that link is going to be coming to your inboxes soon.
Thanks, Liz. I want to give you all an opportunity to type in any questions or comments you may have in the chat box over on the right-hand side of your screen. So this is a chat box that you access by clicking the orange arrow and then typing into the blank spaces towards the bottom of the menu there. As you do that, I want to also go back to something Liz just said about our meeting in Salt Lake City. Our steering committee will be assembling at the Great Basin Consortium and conference, which is associated with the Sagebrush Restoration Conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, during the week of February 22nd through 25th. The Great Basin LCC Steering Committee will meet in person on Monday that week, that is the 22nd, at 12 noon. And we encourage you to come if you are at that conference, sit in and involve yourself with the steering committee. You'll have an opportunity to see how we operate and provide some input from the floor, and we welcome your involvement. The conference itself looks to be very well attended. We have close to 500 people registering at this point, and we will be also televising the events that week live via the internet. That will also be recorded and available for viewing afterwards, should you not be available to watch the activities live. There is a nominal fee associated with subscribing to this. It covers the cost of the cameras and the staff that are doing the filming. So I invite you to take a look at the Sagebrush Restoration Conference website, and you'll find details on registering as a remote participant. It's a nominal fee to participate, and I ask that you do so. Well, seeing no comments or questions in the box, I wanted to conclude then by saying thank you so very much for joining us here today, for listening to our presenters, sharing information about our recent accomplishments and some ongoing activities. And I do ask you to please submit your input on the website so that we can understand more fully what are your priorities and your thoughts in connection with our strategic plan, our work priorities, and where we go from here. This is your chance to help influence conservation in the Great Basin in a way that it will be very well documented and well received. So again, thank you on behalf of the steering committee and the staff of the Great Basin LCC. We'll look forward to seeing you in Salt Lake City. Thanks again. Bye.